Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast where we serve up stories like McDonald's serves up hamburgers. I am, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we're here to tell you a story. Welcome back, everybody. Seth, you want to give us a recap of last week's where we're at so far in this story?
All right, but first off, being someone who lives by a McDonald's, I could assure you that what they're serving is probably not hamburgers. But
all right, it's better than hamburgers.
I was told that they were 100% beef. Now, you notice when they say 100% beef, they're not saying 100% meat. There's a little hide, a little hoof, a little bone ground up in there, a little cartilage.
All right. This
Okay.
podcast is not sponsored by any McDonald's and will never be sponsored now. Thanks, guys. But Seth, give us a recap.
okay, so last week we had Pantheon, genre, and something based on a book you're reading. With genre, I brought forth that this is kind of like a society that has been rebuilt after some kind of cataclysmic event.
Right.
My mind was thinking kind of like if you're familiar with almost like I'm looking right at the books on my shelf here, the Wheel of Time books, right? There's little references where, like there's a Scion Grial, that's basically the Mercedes, little things where then if you know what they are, they're obviously, bits and remnants from a world that's gone by.
Yeah, for sure.
Something like that, or I think like the Shannara books have kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
And so we have something kind of like that, maybe not to that extreme. I think what we had worked out was, there's still some remnants in some of these like old burnt out cities where it's like a steel and concrete jungle, quite literally, like the ecosystem is retaken over, the damage to these, larger areas.
Yeah.
Reed had Pantheon, which is the society that's been built up, is kind of, I say godless, but not like, I don't know, probably, but, godless as in like they have no adherence that anything beyond like science and like new technologies coming up from whatever they're contriving is the ultimate form of anything that's important kind of idea. Yeah. So anything of the supernatural, unseen, higher power than themselves right now in what they can contrive is kind of out of the picture. And then you were reading several different books, but I think it was like the Chronicles of
Thomas
Aquinas, Thomas Covenant, where it's like kind of a fish out of water, someone who is kind of taken from one place, finds himself in a kind of different environment.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if we have a name for our hero, but what it is so in this kind of society, he would have either for whatever, maybe something someone has now might explain how he got here. But he has found himself having been kind of in the old world that used to be. He's now in this world. And I think we brought up that he was probably like a 5th or 6th grade, like science teacher. So there's a lot of stuff where it's like a lot of physical, like stuff with physics and stuff like that. And so it's like, he can like, build a radio and transmitters.
He can do a bunch of little tiny like science projects. He's not like an engineer, but he has like a really baseline understanding of a lot of things.
Yeah, that are practical, can be used with like simple materials. Like I know there's like some of those like 5th and 6th grade, science projects where, with a bit of copper wire and like a AA battery and a bit of tinfoil, you can make your own radio, right?
Right.
Little things like that are, yeah. And that kind of brings in our hero, the thing you were kind of basing off that idea you were reading, our genre and our Pantheon, which brings us to today. So long as I didn't miss anything that you guys can remember.
Reed, do you remember anything that was missed or not missed?
No, he did really well. I thought he covered the high points. There's some things. Go back if you haven't seen it. If you haven't listened to the first one, you should probably go and listen to that first. But
absolutely,
they'll give you an idea.
Absolutely. What story elements did you guys have for this week?
I have fighting style.
I have hero sidekick.
I have unique pet. I have no idea how unique pet's gonna work, so I'd like to hear the hero's sidekick or the fighting style.
I'll jump off with the hero's sidekick. So the hero's sidekick, I'd say, isn't like our hero and has come from this other world, but he's kind of a prepper. You guys have seen Tremors, right?
I think so.
I can't remember his name, but he's I think it's Reba McEntire or someone, some country star was in there, but then it's her husband, and it's like he has the bunker, he has all the guns. I mean, he's got like an elephant gun, like Gatling guns, like prepped up, just really into weapons and stuff. And so if you've seen Tremors, then anyone who's seen Tremors knows what I'm talking about. It's that guy, right? He's kind of his, he goes in and he explores these old sections and he finds like the old weapons, has figured out how to make them work again. And so he's kind of rigged up with some pretty serious firepower, but he's also kind of like always watching his back, covering his trail. Who knows what's left over that's watching us, these things in the dark. And like he's very
Yeah.
as anybody might be familiar, like a conspiracy kook prepper, kind of ready for just about anything, but kind of got the gumption to kind of go make it happen if he needs it to happen.
What's his name?
I don't Charles. For our story, this guy's name is Charles, which probably isn't his real name because he probably doesn't give out his real name.
Right, of course.
Just can't be too careful. You know what I mean?
So are we saying in this world that if you like dig enough, you'll find like old cars and stuff, or is like most of that kind of that like degraded now?
I would say degraded, or just I would say the way that would go after a collapse like that, you'd probably have a year or so of like a Mad Max, and then as people needed, metal for building or making swords or
right,
weapons or stuff, cars, things, they break down, get torn up. Probably in some of these jungle cities, you might find some remnants of different things. I would say, as our friend Charles, he's kind of got the know-how to kind of look and find a lot of these hidden stashes. I would say if someone had a bunker somewhere with stashes of this stuff that would be protected from the elements, one could find a treasure trove. Now, would this society know how to use most of it? Probably not. But I would say that our friend Charles has found some of these places, has built some of these places. So as he's going, he's got, safe houses where he's found, old bunkers, secret places, food stashed up, weapons stashed up, supplies stashed up, and in places that, no one would ever find or couldn't access unless they had, the right, code or whatever it is to get into this place, or the right combination to a lock, or,
right. Did we determine how our hero is into this world?
I don't think
not
so.
Exactly. We didn't get into the details of it.
Because I sort of feel like Charles being like a prepper, but also being kind of like a semi-historian or kind of like a scavenger. I feel like he would have. I have this vision. I'm just thinking of Futurama and Fry like freezing himself, or like Idiocracy, and them kind of like getting frozen and then like stuffed into a shelf somewhere and waiting a couple of years. Like maybe this isn't so much into a new universe as it is into a new future, and therefore basically a new universe.
Yeah.
I was gonna say either something where maybe there's something that he was cryogenically put under, and maybe Charles finds him in one of his places. Maybe that's how he gets out, or kind of comes into this place.
Guys, I'm sorry, I just went off. When you mentioned Idiocracy, I was thinking, was that the one where they were like watering the plants with Gatorade?
It is in fact the one.
You are correct. That's the one.
That's where I went off. I just went off there for a minute. I'm sorry. I'm back now.
I mean, hey, why not? It has what plants crave.
It has electrolytes. But I don't think that this world is like full of dumb people.
No. Okay.
No.
Yeah. Maybe the whole question of, so I have this kind of thing that's kind of building in my brain, and you guys tell me if this is stupid. So here's what happened. Something terrible happened in the past. a lot of people saw that it was coming. So a lot of scientists and engineers and people like that were sort of, a way was made for them to survive, right? Deep underground vaults, cryogenic freezing, things like that, digitizing of their consciousness, things like that. All these things happened. And the religious people of the world, some of them thought we should do this cryogenic freezing stuff, but most of them said, well, it's the end of the world, right? And turns out it was the end of that world. It wasn't the end of the world as a whole, right? The Christians' God didn't come back. The Buddhists, I don't know what Buddhism believes. The Buddhism thing didn't happen. The Muslim thing didn't happen. The whoever else believes, I don't know what other religions really believe. None of the Armageddons happened, right? But because that happened, a lot of the religious information was lost. So who was it that came out of these vaults? It was all the scientists. It was all the philosophers. It was all these educated people who weren't religious. Some of them were religious, but predominantly they weren't. And so that's why we have this kind of society of kind of doing away with any kind of mysticism or anything like that.
Yeah, I had written down as far as the pantheon, which was kind of a negation of a pantheon, and I have that learning and science were looked to for the answers to any problem, and that there was an educators guild that hold pretty much complete control of schooling through every level. So there was kind of a hierarchy that was built around that.
Right. Now I'm trying to figure out why the hero would have been preserved. And I think that maybe he wasn't preserved on purpose, or okay, it's coming to me now. You guys ready for it? The hero was very good friends with his good buddy Charles, who was a prepper, right? Now, Charles worked for the government for a long time, black sites, stuff like that. So he was able to acquire some tech. And when he looked at the realities of the coming struggle, what he determined is his friend, the hero, wasn't going to be able to survive. He wasn't married. He didn't have any children. He didn't have any structure around him. He was this like really nice, but kind of simple, kind of high school teacher, where Charles said, I have like a bunker. I have a setup here. So Charles made the decision to freeze his friend in the cryostasis machine that he had made, and then taught his children how to be preppers and how to be prepared. And then they taught their children, and then they taught their children. And here, however many generations later, Charles is teaching his children and taking care of the facility. The generators have always been running since he was a child. It was a struggle to break down plastic into diesel fuel in order to keep the generators running, but the generators had to run because the guy was cryogenically frozen in there, and it's like been passed down from his family. And so now finally it's opened up, and the hero comes out and he sees a guy named Charles who looks kind of like his friend, right? But not like really like his friend, but kind of. And he kind of talks the same. It's the same ranch. It's the same compound. What do you guys think?
I like it.
You started going on. I'm like, okay, this works. However, it's going to have to be his kids, because I was already kind of thinking that where, it was like a generational thing where then they were taught down, and then so it's great.
So I want to just interject,
and all going by the name, Charles.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to interject the fighting style here, because we've got, in a world where everything is material, rational, objective, fighting has been reduced to mastery of weapons and bringing to bear superior force. In other words, just, armed thuggery, basically.
Right.
But there is like an underground or a few. There are among a few for whom honor, valor, courage, and loyalty have been rescued virtues from this increasingly cynical society. Kind of a martial art form has arisen. and it's incorporating what can be. It incorporates what can be imagined. And I'm kind of thinking like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, kind of. It's like almost defying the laws of physics. It's almost in the mind. Their ability to do seemingly impossible
Right.
physical acts, and it's and it's like, it's been laughed off as like form over function, but it's literally the grace and beauty of form yields astonishing functionality, and these fighters are deadly, and of course they are this kind of underworld they've been laughed off as cultists and whatnot, but they are they're connected to our hero and his sidekicks. So,
And this is what makes the hero such the hero, is that he is the only old worlder left,
right.
which means he's the only one that possesses the unique cybernetic enhancements of his day.
Yeah.
Which connect him to the unique pet, which is the hundreds of billions of nanobots that just exist in the world, which then makes it so that when he starts to learn this fighting style, it like actually starts to work for him.
Yeah, cool.
Because he's the only one left who can communicate, who can sort of connect with this thing. Maybe I'm trying to figure out why, because I have this feeling like the whole story before this fall is another story all by itself, where Charles is the main character and our friendly high school not high school teacher, but our friendly school teacher is the sidekick. And then for some reason, Charles wants to save him and is willing to like do all these things to make that happen. And I'm trying to figure out why that's the case. I don't know. Maybe it's just because he's his friend and he knows,
or maybe
it's like he knows he
so-
won't survive. There's like something that's going to happen that he knows that his friend won't survive. And so then he has to put him in this cryo sleep.
So maybe it's this, right? Some people have a very keen ability to like remember everything that they've read,
Right.
right? Someone with a very, I don't know if it would be high IQ, but like a way that they go about reading or memorizing things. And maybe sometimes people have to like practice this memorization skill, but I'd like to say that it's like a photographic memory, right? And so you have this guy, he's a learned man. He's read a lot of books. He's read a lot of things.
Right.
And so in the world that's coming up, someone like Charles, would be able to survive. He can do it, right? He can grow crops, pull the radiation off of it, keep it, right?
Yeah.
Filter the water, but it's a hard life, right? It's a knowledge of like a physicality, whereas like knowing that in the future, immediately this person would be probably get killed because he'd hold too much power or be a spot of contention, but would be very helpful. Like, let's say maybe he didn't expect him to be in the chrono thing that long, but like
Right.
let the Mad Max stage go by, let some form of stability reshape, right? And
Right.
then let someone who has spent 40, 50 years of his life pretty much in college, lecturing, teaching, he's taught, all this stuff, maybe not in college, but like, right, college graduate, reads a lot, studies a lot, knows all this stuff. It's all there.
Yeah, like a
Right.
walking library, basically.
Right. And so it's like, this would be someone that you would need, 100 years down the road, right? Although some of that information would be great, but everyone's going to want it. And then, or want to kill him so that if they can't have him, then no one will, right? Especially in like the Mad Max kind of stage of things. And so
Yeah.
maybe that would be the reason behind it. Whatever it was, so that enough society has been built around that someone could step back out and not, let's say, not be too out of place, but be
Right.
able to interject now book after book and all this other knowledge to be, brought forth that, would have been lost or fought and killed. And then what? Now no one knows how to read, all this other stuff. I don't know. That's
Yeah, I like
kind of what
that.
comes to my
I think
mind.
that's a good idea. I think that's fair. I think that if we ever make the prequel to it, Charles is definitely is not the main character, but definitely the hero and saves his friend. And now his friend comes up, out of the cryogenic thing. And now he has to kind of face a lot of the fears and a lot of the insecurities of like having once just kind of been the tag along guy.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
now all of a sudden he has to be the guy to learn the fighting style, and he has to be the guy to, interface and control all these hundreds of billions of nanobots, which are like turning his thoughts and actions into reality.
This is really a fun story.
Because I think in something like that, I mean, I know from the Christian realm, we always, get a bit leery with like the implant or the chip, as it would be, some of that.
Yeah.
More interface. But for all intents and purposes, let's pretend that isn't exactly the case. And kind of that knowing that he has it, right? So I'm thinking like when you brought up the nanobots, that's, like he's got like an internal clock. And all these other people have now like reverted back to sundials, and they're barely kind of scraping at the surface. He comes out now, there's still all these hundreds of satellites. There's still all these, all the kind of nano information out there that would have been accessible, right? I mean, imagine what places in like these, let's say, concrete jungles that won't open up, and unless you had like the chip to get into the department store. I don't know. I'm just
that's exactly what I'm saying. He can look and see, he can like take a piece of metal and hold it, and it'll like tell him, oh, this is really impure. Here are the impurities, here, and here, And so he does a sword fight with somebody, and he sort of quote unquote expertly breaks their, priceless blade, because to them, they couldn't see the chips, they couldn't see the imperfections, but like he can. And so then he starts, building radios, and everyone is like, their minds are just exploding because he's talking about, long distance communication. And they're like, well, yeah, we have runners. We've just started to train birds to carry messages back and forth. And he's like, well, look, this box, I can talk to you from hundreds of miles away. It's the kind of idea, they talk about it in like lit RPGs and stuff, with like the heads up displays. Lit RPGs are like books about people who play video games, and the video games are like a big aspect, and there's lots of talk about like menus and submenus and leveling up and dialogue and information and pop-ups and stuff like that. These are the kind of things he was very used to seeing in the world that he lived in before, and now he still sees, except for the fact that no one else sees them.
Yeah.
And he is the only one who sort of has access to this giant trove, but he's just still one man. It like doesn't matter that he has this thing, he quickly realizes why Charles locked him in, and why subsequent Charles kept him locked in for so long, is that the world still, it hasn't made its place that he can really be the most useful. Like the Charleses were hoping to open him up to take him out when it was time to like rebuild the universities, but they're still like a couple years away from the Renaissance, It's still like a little bit barbaric. It's not quite Mad Max, but it's still a little bit barbaric. So I like this character who's really used to, and previously has just kind of been the sidekick, now having to kind of make his way and learn how to be the kind of main guy, while also sort of learning about this power he has and not giving it away too much, I think this is some really good world building. Do you guys have any other interesting ideas you want to add to this as we wrap up this last episode, or are you good?
I'm good.
I think it's a good place to end, unless we can like come up with an idea of like what's like the villain. I know in this one none of us had villain or villain sidekick or anything like that.
Right.
So
Right. We'll
that
have
might
to
be
think.
something to
Absolutely. I can't think of
focus
anything
on.
right
Yeah.
now. I know for sure that this world that we're creating here is not devoid of selfish people, but we'll have to figure out exactly what that selfish people look like next week. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us for this episode of Wait, It Gets Better. If you have any questions, comments, constructive criticism, or compliments, send them to us at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com or message us on Twitter at @getsbettercast. We, of course, love to hear from you, love to see what you have written to us, and we will shout you out and reply. And until next time, don't forget to wait, because it gets better.